worst part is I saw that coming and I couldn't stop it. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're going over the 70 books I read in 2024. So first, let's start with some stats. So I have my trusted iPad here and Goodreads open to help us out. So in 2024, I read 70 books for a combined total of 30,554 pages. And my average book length was 436 pages. Now let's just get straight into all the books I read. We're gonna go through them pretty quickly because we'd be here all day otherwise. So I started the year reading the Throne of Glass series. So we have Queen of Shadows, the 5th book, I believe, in the series. I rated this a 4 stars. It was pretty good from what I remember, but honestly they kind of all blurred together, so I'm not sure what events happened in which book. But then I read Tower of Dawn, which I expected to hate this from what I heard everybody talking about, but I actually really like this one and I gave it a 4 stars as well. Then we have Empire of Storms. I rated this one another 4 stars. Wow, I just love 4 stars, but no, it was good. And then we have this behemoth of a book, Kingdom of Ash. Goodreads says I rated it a 4.5, but I'm pretty sure I was just being stingy. I'm gonna rate this one a 5 stars. Overall, I really love the Throne of Glass series so much, and I recommend you read it. These books were definitely some of the best of the year. Then I was feeling kind of sentimental, so I started rereading some old books. So we started with Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. When I read this the first time, I gave it a 5 stars, but when I read it the second time, I gave it a 3. I don't know, but I still think it's so fun, and honestly, I'd recommend it if you like Harry Potter. Read this. Then, oh my gosh, I read Flowers for Algernon for like the 30th time. I love this book so much. Like, I will recommend this to every single person ever. It's so good. I want to reread it again. I will never get tired of this book. Please read it. 5 stars, 6 stars, 600 million stars. And then I reread the best book series I have ever read in my life, and that is Red Rising. I annotated this book to death. I love this book so much. It's sci-fi fantasy, but don't let yourself be thrown off by the sci-fi part, because seriously, at least the first book, it's so easy to follow. It does get heavier in the second and third book. However, I personally, this was the first sci-fi book I've ever read, but it was very digestible, very understandable, and I recommend it to everyone once again. Like, if you don't like Red Rising, I question you. I shouldn't say that, but it's just, I love this book that much. Like, you have those books where you don't understand how anybody else hates it, and basically that's me with this. So obviously, I had to read them all. I annotated them all insanely. These are all 6-star reads for me. Like, seriously, especially Morning Star and Golden Sun. Oh my gosh. But Red Rising is still 5 stars. Like, so after Red Rising, we kind of took a turn. I read Him. It's like this romance book. It was on Kindle Unlimited, so I just read it really quickly, and honestly, it's pretty forgettable, but while I was reading it, I remember I did enjoy it, so I gave it a 4 stars actually. That's kind of crazy. I'd probably change this to a 3, but clearly I enjoyed it at the moment, so I would not recommend this. So yeah, that's really all I can say about this. It was very mid, but also like everything a romance book needs to be. And then I thought, since I love Red Rising and that's sci-fi, maybe I should try another sci-fi book. So I read Nofek, I have no clue how to say this, Nofek Gloss, I'm gonna say that, by Essa Hansen, and let me tell you, what even was this book? I don't get it. 2 stars. When I think back to what I read, I can't even comprehend it because it was so outlandish. Like, I know sci-fi, like, it's gonna be out there. This was like too out there. On the lighter note, I then entered a 24-hour readathon, and I started it by reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and R.F. Kuang is my favorite author ever. The Poppy War series is another one of my favorite books ever. Babel, of course, love it. So Yellowface, I obviously love this one too. I gave it a 4.5 stars. The concept of this book was so interesting, and that really drew me in. Even though the character was like super annoying, you just like wanted to keep reading. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You just like couldn't tear your eyes away, and that's exactly how I felt with this book. So I would definitely recommend this. The ending just kind of threw me off, so that's why I didn't get a 5 stars, but still 4.5. It was very good. And then I read my first thriller of the year with None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I believe I read this primarily or listened to it through audiobook, and that was the best decision ever because this book is about 2 women and one of them has a podcast, so we're kind of listening to that podcast as one of the main things in this book. And so that was super cool to listen to, and thrillers are always kind of iffy for me. Like, they either get me or they don't. I either like them or I don't. And this one I really, really liked. I gave this one a 5 stars. Like, I really, really enjoyed this. One of the best thrillers I have ever read, and I stand by that. Like, seriously, I recommend this. Then on the other side of thrillers, I read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. The thing is with this book, it was so good. It was so good. I was like, oh my gosh, another 5-star thriller? But then I got to the end and I was like, what did I just read? Yeah. So the ending was pretty terrible and horrible, and I will probably never read another Riley Sager book because of that. But the first like 80% I loved, so take that as you will. Goodreads has it as a 4 stars, but that probably should be lower. Oh my gosh, this next book is gonna be very controversial because everybody loves it so much. However, I read The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and I hated this book. I hated it so bad. So bad. It was so bad. I gave it a 2 stars, probably should be a 1 stars, but yeah. Then ending that 24-hour readathon on a good note, I read The 7-Year Slip, and this book definitely made me tear up in some parts, like even on the very first couple of pages, and I really, really love this book. Like, just thinking back to it, I can still remember how I felt reading it, and I loved how it wasn't just about the romance. Like, there was a very heavy subplot of grief and mourning and like living your life how you want to live it, and I just really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it a, it's actually not saying, okay, I gave it a 4 stars. And then this next book I read, honestly, when I was going through my shelves trying to get every book so I could like have it behind me, I totally forgot I read it. I read The Shadow of What Was Lost and An Echo of Things to Come. And, well, now that I'm thinking about it and remembering that I actually did in fact read these books, they were good, but entirely unrememberable. Like, clearly nothing that grasped my interest or attention. Wait, but I actually did like this book. Okay. I don't even know. Goodreads says I rated them both. Can you guess it? 4 stars. Yep. They both got 4 stars, and honestly, I will stand by that. I just think I've read so many other fantasy books that were like very similar to this that they all kind of just like fade into each other after a while. And then I read my first ever Emily Henry book. I read Beach Read, and I did give this a 5 stars. I really love the vibes, the banter. I love the subplot in it, of course. Emily Henry knows how to do that very well, apparently. I don't know. I've only read 1 book by her. But from what I'm hearing, she loves her romance books to be almost like literary fiction with a heavy romance plot. And then I read another extremely popular book talk romance, and that is The Love Hypothesis. I love this one less. I gave it a 3 stars. It was just kind of like meh, and honestly the characters kind of bothered me, but it was just like cutesy fun. Nothing that can be taken too seriously, so I liked it. It was okay. And then Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This book deserves so much more hype. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much. I bought it for my friend recently. Like, I just want everybody to read it and enjoy it as much as I did. I loved how like their romance was like the cutest, most pure romance ever. And the setting, oh my gosh, it was everything you could ask for. Seriously, everything. And the then and now timeline, oof, it was really good. Oh my god. I need to reread this. Okay, next book. I read Daisy Jones and the Six, and I had started this book and then I kind of soft DNF'd it, and then I picked it back up this past year, and it was everything I could have asked it to be and more. I love every single book by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Like, seriously, I've read so many of her books by now, and they always hit. They're always so intriguing. The characters always are so complex. It's always a joy to read her books. So I, of course, rated this book a 5 stars. I loved it, and if you have somehow not read any Taylor Jenkins Reid's book, I would seriously recommend reading either this one or The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo to start. And then I read The Friend Scheme. I read this in a video where I was reading the highest and lowest rated books on my shelves, and this was the lowest rated one. It had like an average rating of like 3 something, and I did in fact give it a 3 stars. It was like cute, but it was also nothing special. It was just like a quick, easy romance book. And honestly, I would recommend this to you. I'd say it's really fun to read. It's just nothing like that's gonna leave a meaningful impact or be one of your favorite reads. Then I read Milk and Honey. Can you even say you read it if it's a poetry book? I'm not sure, but I didn't rate this one. I did like some of the ones in here, but nothing like stuck with me. This is like the only poetry book I have ever read, so if you do like poetry, recommend me some of your favorites in the comments and I will look into it. And then I read the highest rated book on my shelves, which was The Will of the Many, and I did enjoy it, I think. Okay, hold on. I gave it a 4.5, and I do remember really liking it, but I never fully became attached or drawn in, so I didn't get a 5 stars, but it was still good. And when the second one comes out, like, I will be reading the second one immediately. I can sense a reread in the future, and I might bump it up to a 5, but for now it's a 4.5, and I will recommend it. It's kind of unique, at least to me. I had never read a fantasy book like this. It's a Roman-inspired fantasy, which was really fun and interesting to read. It kind of switched things up and it was more unique, which I really enjoyed, and overall it was a very solid read. Then I read The Hurricane Wars by Thea Guanzon, and 3 stars. This book was so inconsistent to me. It had really high highs but then really low lows, and the pacing was crazy. It was everywhere. I didn't like it very much, but I know there's people out there who might. It is a romantasy. They're like kind of fake dating, enemies to lovers, that kind of trope. It's very tropey, but like I said, look into it, you might like it. But a book that was for me, Piranesi, whatever it's called. I think about this book so often. I think originally I rated it a 4.5, but I have definitely brought that up since then. This book is a 5 stars, if not a 6-star read. It was incredible. The imagery was insane. The setting in general, oh my gosh. The plot twists were also insane. Like, when a book is good, I just become speechless, and that's exactly what I am right now. Like, do you see? Like, that's all I can say. And then I read The Office of Historical Corrections, and it's like a short story collection, and I don't know, it was just kind of mid. I think I give it a 3 stars. I did like some of them, but others didn't leave as much of an impact on me, but there were definitely pretty solid ones in here, and I would like to see some of them expanded upon, even though it's meant to be a short story collection, but I think some of these would make banger books, like, seriously. But yeah, this is the first and only like short story collection I have read, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but it's kind of hard to rate a collection of stories because some are higher, some are lower, so. And then I read Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and despite all the hate it's getting right now, I give it a 5 stars. I just thought this was super fun to read. I thought it was unique enough to not be compared to other books like The Hunger Games, but I know the main one is compared to, what's it called, Red Queen. I've not read that one, so I couldn't compare it personally, but I loved it. I loved the banter between our 2 main characters. It was everything you want a romantasy to be, and the ending left you wanting more. 5 stars. And then I read probably my favorite book of the year. I read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So I had actually tried reading this like 3 times before, and the furthest I got was halfway through, but then I just decided one day, like, you know, I need to read this. Let me just do it. So I sat down, I read it, and it ended up being one of my favorite books of all time. I love this book with all of my heart. Like, I even wrote a super long paper over it discussing like Freud and like the ego, superego, id, all that stuff within this book. And so basically, me and this book are like this now because I know everything about it, and I'd recommend it. Actually, I don't know if I would recommend it to people. I don't know, I feel like it takes a very certain reader to like a book like this, but I just so happen to be that exact person, and I ate it up, so 5 stars, 6 stars, The Secret History. And then right after The Secret History, I read Ariadne, and I gave this a 3 stars. It's a Greek mythology retelling of the Minotaur's sister, I believe. I really enjoyed it until the end when I kind of reflected on it, and I was like, there was no kind of growth or development in the character. Overall, I liked it, but there are some things I wish I could have seen in this book that I didn't see, but that's just me being nitpicky, I guess. This next book, I don't know why I didn't DNF it. I would give it a 0 if I could, but I can't, so it gets a 1. That is The Center. I hated this book with every fiber of my being. I kept on waiting for it to get better, and it just never did. But at the same time, it did kind of touch on good topics that aren't discussed in many books. So, despite me hating it, I would recommend this to you. I want you to read it, and I want you to tell me what you think. So yeah. Then I read the entire Caraval series, and I did really enjoy it. I thought it was so fun. I loved the premise. I gave Caraval a 4 stars, Legendary a 3 stars, but then I gave Finale a 4.25. Overall, pretty solid. While it did dip in the middle for me with Legendary, Finale definitely tied everything back together, and I really enjoyed this one. I loved the scenery, like the magic was so interesting, so unique. Okay, after Caraval, I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and this book, I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars. It was so unique, so interesting. I loved the magic. I loved all the characters. I honestly, I just loved everything about this book, and I kind of forgot that. Like, I haven't thought of it in such a long time, but now that I'm thinking about it, I enjoyed every part of it, and honestly, I don't know why I haven't read the second one. After Daughter of the Moon Goddess, I read This Shining Life, and I haven't seen anybody talking about this book, but this book actually was a 5-star read for me. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a literary fiction about a boy who's dealing with the grief of losing his father. It's a very sad book, but also very kind of hopeful. I recommend this to you. I didn't talk about it in any video, but I probably should have, because this book was obviously a 5 stars, and I think more people should know about it. More people should read this, so seriously, look into This Shining Life because it definitely left a deep impact on me. After The Shining Life, I read Magnolia Parks, and despite all the hype, I did go into it expecting to hate it because I hate characters that like are very messy and kind of like characters you are supposed to hate. I just don't like reading about those. However, I did end up giving this a 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was very, very entertaining, very fun. I probably will not continue the series. Like, I didn't like it that much, but I did like it for what it was supposed to be. And then I read The Storied Life of A.J. Thickery. Oh my gosh, I love this book so, so much. Another 5 stars. 3 5 stars in a row. Kind of crazy, but it's kind of reminiscent to me of This Shining Life, so if you like this book, I would highly, highly recommend this book. It touched on very deep topics, but also while doing it in a very kind of warm way. I loved our main character. I loved listening to his life, and I loved everything about it. And also, this book is so floppy, so that makes me like it even more. And then, yet another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I read Carrie Soto is Back, and I did like this one, just not as much as the others. I rated it a 4 stars though, still very, very high. I'd recommend this one. It's about a woman tennis player and all of that entails, and I just loved everything. I loved all the topics it touched upon, and it was very intriguing, and I know nothing about tennis, but it was still, like, understandable to me, I think. And some of the scenes where they talk too much about tennis, I just kind of, like, I nodded along. I was like, yeah, for sure. And then, okay, so, I think these next series of books are what threw me into my, like, months-long reading slump. So, after Carrie Soto is Back, I read Acts of Desperation. I read it on my Kindle, and it honestly wasn't that bad, but I gave it a 2 stars, so maybe it was. And then I started the Wheel of Time series, and I will say, I read 3 of the books in the series. I got like halfway through the 4th, but I couldn't do it after a while. Like, people say like, oh, they get better on like the 8th book. They were just too mid for me to want to continue. Eye of the World was the first one. I rated it a 3.5, I believe. I rated the second one a 4 stars. I liked the plot of it. I liked what was happening. And then the 3rd book, I gave it a 3.5 again. Oh, it's upside down. I don't know. It just wasn't great. In between the 1st and 2nd book of the Wheel of Time series, I read The Echo of Old Books, and I have also not seen anybody talking about this book, but this was also one of the best books I have read all year. Oh my gosh, it was so incredible. It is a historical fiction from the 20s, I believe. Please read it, please. Like, you need to give this book a chance. I loved it with my whole heart. It was great. On the complete opposite spectrum, I read the worst book I've ever read in my life. I wanted to gouge my eyeballs out. Seriously, this book made me question why I even read books, and that book was Slewfoot. I did actually DNF this book, thank God, but I'm including it in my read books because I suffered through 50% of that book, and I just want to spare other people from the pain of reading it, so that's why I'm talking about it. It is like a horror book, and I read one other horror book last year called Mary, and I also hated that book, so maybe I should have learned something from that. And then I didn't read anything for the longest time ever. Then I read She Who Became the Sun, and I will say, I read this to get me out of a reading slump. However, I thought it worked because this book was so good and I flew through it. But then I think because this book was so good, I got even further into a reading slump because nothing else would even compare. Probably best fantasy book I read this year. I loved it. And then I read Love Theoretically. I gave it a 3 stars. I would say this is my favorite out of the Love Hypothesis and this one. That's the only 2 Ali Hazelwood books I've read, but I did like this one better. I like the characters more, I like the plot of this one better. And overall, I thought it was a very solid romance book. Maybe I'd even give it like a 3.5 stars. Whoa. We're getting crazy. Then I read another favorite of mine, and that was Mary Jane. I don't know what I expected going into this one, but this book, it was so incredible. It's set in the 70s. I loved the themes it covered, and I love how our main character, Mary Jane, experienced life. So she is a 14-year-old babysitting this kind of more like hippie family, and she's from a very like uptight opposite end of the spectrum family, so it's definitely a shock to her, but she learns so much, and it's like a found family. It's everything I could ever ask for in a book, and you should read it. Okay, and then I read 2 books on my Kindle. I read Convenience Store Woman and Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. I am just kind of lumping them together because they were both 4 stars, like they were good in the moment, but overall kind of like forgettable. I think out of the 2, I liked Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead better. I honestly do recommend that one, but I don't know if I'd recommend Convenience Store Woman. I don't know, but both 4 stars, they were both like enjoyable. Then I read An Education in Malice. Despite feeling very Wattpad-y, it would have been a good book, but then I just kind of hated the last like 30% of it. So it got a 3 stars. I don't know. And I'm not the person to skip scenes in books, but I had to for this book. If you know, I feel like you know. Then I read Lolita. It was fine. I don't know. I didn't rate it though. Then we have the Atlas 6. This book, I really like books like this with kind of like dark academia themes, so obviously I enjoyed this one. I love the magic. I love how it tied into real world elements, and all the characters, despite kind of hating a few in the beginning, they all grew on me and they were all complex, and I was rooting for them all so much, and this book was just like a big mind game, and I loved it a lot. Then I read Then She Was Gone, and I gave this book a 4.5, but let me tell you, this book was like the darkest thriller I've ever read. I didn't expect it to go where it went. I did like it, but it was just like my jaw was on the floor the whole time. Towards the end, I did kind of sense the reveals, but I felt like that personally didn't take away from my experience reading this book. Honestly, I'd recommend it to you, but I would be cautious going into it. Maybe look at trigger warnings. Actually, definitely look at trigger warnings, but I rated this book a 4.5 stars. Definitely one of the better thriller books I have ever read. Then I read Billy Summers, and I loved this book so much. But then like the last half of it, it just fell very flat for me. Like I was expecting to give this book a 5 stars throughout the whole 50%. But then I just didn't like where it went. But then I really did like the very ending. But overall, it got a 4 stars for me. I would definitely recommend this for you. My first ever Billy Summers book? No, Stephen King book. So I guess that's something to remember. Then I read Dance of Thieves, and I heard lots of mixed reviews going into this book, so I expected to dislike it. However, the first like 50% or maybe even 80%, I was really loving it a lot. And I was like, wow, people were like crazy for saying this book was not good. But then the last 20% happened and I hated the direction it went. I think I can't even remember what it was exactly. I think I blocked it out. But it ended up bringing my rating down from probably like honestly a 4.5 or 5 to a 3 stars, and I will not be reading the second book. I kind of forgot to mention like 4 books. Whoopsies. They were all on my Kindle, so I forgot about them, but it was the Cradle series. I reread 4 of the books in that series, I believe. I gave all of them 4 stars, but let me tell you, the Cradle series, I don't think I've talked about it on this channel, but I love it so much. Every single book just reads like candy. They're so easy to digest and consume, and I read this the first time last year, and I think there's like 13 books in the series. I haven't read all of them. I think I read like 11 maybe, but like all of them just like are so fun. They really feel like you're just like watching a TV show, and me personally, they had like every single trope I love. Like I love the chosen one, I love like overpowered main characters, and that's exactly what the book was. But it was also very like underdog, like kind of a just a very long training arc, and I really loved every single thing in those books. Okay, but yes, now back on track. I read Good Girl, Bad Blood and As Good as Dead to finish off the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and I gave them both a 4 stars, but for different reasons. This one I rated 4 stars just because like it was good, but nothing like special or like crazy good, I guess. But then this book, I expected to give it a 5 stars, like the whole book, but then the ending was just, it fell so flat, so I had to sadly click 4 stars instead of the 5 stars I thought it was going to get. But overall, I really liked the entire Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I think it's overall a 4-star series, so nothing crazy, but it is very good for a YA, like mystery book. And all the plot twists, like the author does a really good job of tying everything together. Like she gives so many, like there's so many directions each book could take, then at the end she like ties them all together perfectly, and you're like, oh my gosh, even that was important. Like there's not a single useless thing in these books, and I love it so much. Like it's great. Oh wow, I forgot another book I read. Okay, I guess I'm gonna mention it now. I read A Deal with the Devil. That name is so stupid, but it is a romance book, and it was like definitely Wattpad, but Wattpad in like the best way possible. It was like between like a plastic surgeon in Miami and his like assistant, and I mean, it was fun. But yeah, then I read Iron Gold, and this is probably my biggest disappointment of the year, I would say, because I loved the Red Rising series so much. And this is kind of like, it's the 4th book, but also that series, like you can read it alone. He kind of just like added on with this book. But in this book, we start to get like more POVs, and I think I just kind of got lost, and I never recovered from that. I ended up giving it a 4 stars, and that's pretty good, right? But I expected it to be a 6-star read, and I expected to be like immediately needing the 5th book, but I just don't feel any like urge to do that. So yeah. And then I read Reckless, the sequel to Powerless, and I give it a 5 stars. Everything I said about Powerless, I feel the same way about this book. It was entertaining, I loved the banter, and sure, it was like definitely very similar to Dance of Thieves. I mean, I told you, I really like Dance of Thieves until the ending, but this book did what Dance of Thieves couldn't do, and it made it captivating every single second, and the plot twist at the end was crazy, and I definitely need book 3 right now. And then I read Phantasma. I gave this a 4.5 stars, but it's a romantasy, and I love all the characters. I do think the pacing was kind of off, but overall I think the atmosphere was great. The story was very compelling, like I wanted to read more. It would have been a 5 stars, but then some of the inconsistencies led it to be a 4.5 instead of a 5, but obviously a 4.5 is still crazy good, and I will definitely be reading the second book. And then I read my favorite romantasy of the year, and that was Quicksilver. I gave this a 5 stars. I really loved it. To me, it was kind of reminiscent of the feelings I got from A Court of Mist and Fury, the second book in the ACOTAR series, and I love that book series so much, so I think if you like that book, you will love Quicksilver because this one is even better to me. Their chemistry was everything, like all the plot twists. You don't go into this book expecting it to be like anything crazy, but then it is, and once again I'm just silent because I can't think of anything to say since it was just so good. Like, I need you to go into this blind and just love it as much as I did because it was great. 5 stars. Quicksilver, the best romantasy book I read. I would say even better than the 4 Throne of Glass books I read at the beginning of the year. So yeah. Then after Quicksilver, I read The Song of Achilles. This was a reread, and of course I gave this a 6 stars. I love anything Greek mythology, and Madeline Miller just knows how to write so well, and it's just everything you could ask for. Like, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. 6 stars. I love The Song of Achilles with my whole entire being, and please read this if you haven't. And now, we have finally got to the last book I read in 2024, and that was Lovely War. I ended the book with a banger. Wait. Oh my god. I ended the year with a banger. 5 stars. I love this book so much, but I will in fact never be reading a historical fiction ever again because this book just brought me so much pain and I loved it. It was great. So it's kind of like historical fiction through World War I, but through the eyes of Aphrodite, and that is so unique. I loved all the 4 characters we were following. Like, I was attached to them from like their very first introduction, and it just hurts. It hurts. It hurts. But yes, please read this. Holy moly. Guys, this is gonna follow me. Yeah. Okay. Well, might as well just end the video here before the rest of these piles fall too. But yes, that is all 70 books I read in the year 2024. Hopefully. Honestly, we were kind of all over the place. I don't know if I got all of them. I would say I had a really good reading year. There were definitely some very low lows, but also the highs were very high. And while I didn't hit my reading goal, I'm also very proud for what I did do. Like, just looking at it here, like, this isn't even all the books I did read, but this just looks like so much, and that's crazy. I'm very proud of myself, and for this upcoming year, my goal is quality over quantity. So because of that, I set my reading goal to be 30 or 40 books. I think it's at 40 books, but honestly, I might lower that to 30 because I definitely want to take my time with books and focus on selecting books I know I'm going to like. So currently, I am reading The Way of Kings because I feel like I know I'm going to love that series, but also I was putting it off for so long simply because it's 1,000 pages per book, and while that is insane, I will stand by that. I just think the fact that I was putting books off because they were too long is not great because I know I'll like them. Like, if I know I'll probably like a book a lot, like, why am I holding myself back from reading that simply because it's like too long? So yeah, that's what I'm gonna focus on this year. Quality over quantity. So my reading goal is 30, maybe 40 books. So I hope to see you next year in 2025. Hopefully every book we read is a 5 stars. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more awesome, super duper cool content just like this in the future. But yeah, bye everyone.